Welcome to the Commercial Awareness Compass. This is your weekly guide to developing your commercial awareness in a way that goes beyond just the news. Each week, we focus on one major story and we break it down to help you build your understanding at 3 levels: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. I'm Tori, I'm a future trainee solicitor, and I'm joined by Henry, a corporate lawyer and content creator. Today's session, we're going to focus on the UK's new agreement with the EU. So as we go through the beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels, really keep an eye on how each explanation builds on the last. You first want to get to grips with the basics and then consider broader legal and commercial issues. And then at the advanced level, we'll start thinking long-term and strategically. So if we jump into the beginner level, Henry, could you set the scene, please? Just tell us a little bit about this agreement.
Yeah, for sure. So as you kindly mentioned, Tori, we're talking about Prime Minister Keir Starmer recently announcing a significant agreement that's going to between the EU and the UK, which is kind of aiming to kind of revitalize and sort of bring back together some of the post-Brexit relations that once were prior to Brexit taking place back in 2016, almost 10 years ago now. And it is projected that this new agreement is going to sort of boost the UK economy alone by 9 billion and annually, that is. And it signifies a significant shift in kind of the relationship that the UK has had with Europe over the last few years. So it's going to be interesting to see how this looks.
For sure. And I mean, super interesting that it's expected to add, did you say £9 billion a year?
9 billion, yes, annually, yes.
Okay, so lots to talk about then. What are the kind of features of this agreement? Like, what are some of the things that have been agreed upon?
Yeah, so firstly, again, we're going to see this huge economic boost with the sort of the 9 billion annually, and it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that looks over the years with sort of as the agreement comes to light. But it also kind of begs the question to how much money was the sort of the UK economy losing post-Brexit in all of the years before as a result of Brexit. We're also going to see, and it was highlighted, announced in the media, that we're going to see cheaper food, and that's going to come from a lot of border checks being removed on certain British food exports, which in turn could then make the food cheaper here in the UK. So then the sort of the weekly shop will go down, which will obviously impact end users like me and you guys positively. We're also going to see, again, this will be a huge sort of win for the fishing markets and the fishing parts of the UK in terms of EU boats can fish in UK waters until 2038, which a lot of people have seen as positive, but it has upset some in the UK fishing industry. And I think this agreement as a whole has been received positively, but there have also been a lot of critics, and we're seeing a lot of criticism from those that perhaps were more sort of pro-Brexit when it came to the EU-UK relationship discussions back in 2016. And also we're going to see easier travel for those that are in the UK and trying to get into the EU with the, what are they called, the digital passport face scanners. The UK is rejoining. We have a lot of students watching this. The UK is rejoining the Erasmus scheme, which allows for UK students to be placed in European universities to do studying abroad, which is obviously, again, great for getting that sort of, I would say, sort of unique exposure and experience that when it comes to applying for training contracts, when it comes to applying for vacation schemes, we can say, oh, we've had this international secondment, we've done X, Y, and Z, which can kind of make your applications stand out.
Nice. I love that connection that you drew to the training contract applications, because for sure, I think that experiences like that can really help. The other thing that you said, I think that is also really worth emphasizing, is when you were talking about cheaper food and how that this could result in some lower prices for the weekly shop. I think this is so good to point out at the beginner level, because I think when a person is at the start of developing their commercial awareness, thinking about the impact on consumers is usually a great place to start, because that's something that's really easy for us all to comprehend. You know, like you can get like what the price would be. So then now it's, I think, more in the intermediate and advanced levels that then we're looking of like really what's all the behind the scenes that is impacting those prices. So was there anything you wanted to add at the beginner level before we move on? Because I think you've already given a really great overview.
Yeah, I would just add on the point, sorry, Ari, that you raised around the sort of the entry to commercial awareness. Whilst I focus on the consumer being the kind of being impacted, also the organizations, the farming and the food manufacturers exporting, how this could impact them if there are sort of checks being removed, then arguably it may be cheaper for them to start exporting foods as well, so there'll be reduced costs. So if law firms have clients in those spaces, these were things that they will be considering off the back of that. So as you mentioned, Tori, when you're kind of starting your intro to commercial awareness and understanding it, just kind of keep taking steps back and asking yourself, so what does that mean? How does this impact this group? What other groups could also be impacted? And kind of just start asking yourself these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is actually the most perfect segue into our intermediate level, because really that's the step back that we would take to get to the intermediate level, is thinking about how then our business is affected by this. And then in turn, how would law firms help businesses navigate those issues? So if we move then into the intermediate level, now that our viewers are leveling up, what are the kind of broader legal and commercial issues do you think that people need to be thinking about here?
Yeah, this new agreement brings up a whole host of points that can be discussed and considered, and obviously we're sort of time constrained with this, so I would urge anyone who's interested in this space to definitely do some deeper reading. But there are quite a few things, so if we focus on just a few for the time being, one of the biggest things is, as we saw back in 2016 when Brexit came into effect, a lot of time was spent by law firms prepping and getting their businesses ready for this shift to a post-EU, post-Brexit life. And now we're going to be sort of embarking on this new legal environment. We need to be supporting clients and planning and getting ready for this. And what does this mean for them? How does this agreement impact them, especially if they're clients that operate within the EU? What does that relationship look like? There's also going to be, again, as we shift from post-Brexit to this new agreement, this kind of regulatory realignment, we're going to see some shifts in the regulatory space, particularly those in regulated sectors. We touched on food quite a bit. What does this mean? What are these EU standards that they're going to need to be complied with? What are the operational aspects of this? What are the legal steps that need to be taken? So kind of providing clients in those sectors with the support that they need to kind of operate their businesses in a way that's compliant with the agreement and allows them to perform and operate within the EU effectively. I think also we're going to need to, from a commercial perspective, where clients have sort of certain contracts and what those contract provisions say, is we're going to kind of need to take a review of these contracts. We will probably see contract checklists coming out from law firms to say, here's how to get your contract ready for this new agreement. And it will be sort of juniors and associates that will be assisting on this and checking these contracts. A lot of dispute resolution processes are largely focused on certain court processes. This may change depending on where the clients are based, if we're sort of involving the EU elements of this in terms of jurisdiction. And also if there are going to be some regulatory changes, whether or not a force majeure provision is operated or enacted as a result of this sort of big change. A force majeure clause, for those that are unaware, is basically a clause in a contract that says if one of these really bizarre and unlikely scenarios happen, like COVID, like, I don't know, an earthquake, a shark attack, or the EU and the UK like working together again, the contract may change, or that may be grounds for terminating that contract if the parties want to. And I think also we'll see a lot of work in law firms and sort of literature being posted by law firms to their clients, which really focuses on kind of broad cross sort of practice area alignment and working together. So we're going to see coordination between trade, public law, tax, the regulatory teams because of this deal, and they're going to be offering sort of joint solutions to clients to ensure that they are operating effectively as possible and within the remits and the realm of this new agreement.
For sure. I think also this story is a really good one for our viewers to just get a handle on the kind of things that lawyers really do, because I think that it's obviously quite, what's the word? Like this has been in the news a lot. It's, as you mentioned, like Brexit having been about 10 years ago, that was very much in the news. So I think that for a lot of our listeners, this is something that they've probably been conscious of, aware of for a long time. So it's an easy change for our viewers, I think, to be familiar with that these changes are happening. But I think also that smaller examples of things like this probably happen all the time, that legal changes are happening all the time, and lawyers are there to help their clients navigate those changes. So I think this is probably just like a very hot topic example of the kind of thing that lawyers would actually help their clients with all the time.
Yeah, 100%. And it's our role as lawyers and sort of trusted advisors to kind of assess the market, see what's going on, what's the word, like horizon scan, and advise clients accordingly. And ultimately, the UK is going to be having this closer relationship with the EU. So we need to be advising clients to say, okay, this may affect pricing, this may affect the tax regime that you're working with. Client compliance costs may differ because now we're complying with a new regulatory standard. Here's what we need to do. Here's how you get your business ready for that. So I think it's a really exciting time. And I personally think that a closer alignment with the UK, with Europe as the UK is great for businesses.
And I think that the point that you just made as well about advising clients on likely pricing or compliance, things like that, I think that also really illustrates what a lot of commercial awareness is about, which is just understanding the role of lawyers as commercial advisors, not only legal advisors, that you need to really understand what are the commercial concerns that your clients might have with all of these changes. I think that kind of straddles the line between intermediate and advanced, unless there was anything else that you wanted to say on intermediate before we move up.
No, I haven't got anything further to add at that stage.
Okay, so if we move into advanced, because advanced is, we are thinking as well about how lawyers are these commercial advisors to really understand what are the kind of strategic considerations that their clients might have. So what would you say is related to this story about the ways that lawyers can be these really helpful advisors thinking long-term and strategically?
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of law firms, a lot of the firms that those watching this will be applying for or about to join as trainees will be working with clients who are multinational clients. So what those law firms will be needing to do is looking at those clients, where they operate, and what kind of understand whether or not the closer UK and EU trade deal and this new environment that we're in justifies kind of reevaluating and restructuring the way that they operate. Do we need to look at different supply chains? Where are we sort of, how is our company's structure on like organizational chart set out? Do we need to have different subsidiaries? Do we need different tax? Do we need different subsidiaries for tax, different taxes, customs, and various regulatory benefits that probably certain structures were built one way because of how the UK regulatory regime was post-Brexit. With that now changing, do we need to assess? And again, that will involve the corporate team working with the tax team and working with various other sort of teams within the organization, the firm, to kind of say, this is how we should structure it. Actually, having this subsidiary isn't tax efficient. And this kind of then steps into the role of, we need to be assessing the risk to our clients as a result of this new closer alignment. How do we manage any legal risks that are likely to come in with this sort of added layer of sort of EU oversight? Are there going to be any compliance gaps between the way that the clients are currently complying with the regulatory regime to what this new regime is going to look like with this new sort of trade agreement in place? What are those gaps? How do we mitigate the risks? How do we advise our clients to say, okay, there's a gap here. This is what you need to do to comply. This is what we think you need to do. Do you have workers that are based in Europe? What does that look like in this post-agreement phase? And that's when the employment team will kind of get involved. And I think also one of the big things that, depending on the firm that you're in and what the sort of key sectors that they operate in, is having a look at what sectors are most impacted by this agreement. We've spoken about food, we've spoken about agriculture, transport and sort of education are likely to be huge sectors that are impacted by this. What are firms doing with clients in those sectors? How are they looking to kind of assist them and support them, and really understanding what this agreement means and how it's going to kind of impact them are some of the key things that I think law firms need to be focusing on at this stage.
I think also you've highlighted, I was just actually writing it down because I think it's something that's really useful to equip our listeners with as they are preparing to answer these kind of commercial awareness questions or to think about things this way. Because, so of course, one thing that law firms need to be aware of is what are the sectors that are likely to be most affected. But I also think that is just a perfect question for someone to put in their kind of commercial awareness toolkit as well, that anytime you're reading a commercial story, think about what sectors would be most affected, because that then of course means that that's where the work is for the lawyers.
Yeah, and I think on the sector point, Tori, you nailed that. And I would just add that what you want to be checking is the firms that you're applying for, what sectors do they operate in? Have a look, check. So then when you go into your interviews, you can say, okay, you have a huge like agricultural focus. You work with a lot of high net worth farming clients, X, Y, and Z. They will have sort of certain political leanings, because of sort of the nature of how they operate and where they work. The clients, what does this deal mean for them? How is this going to impact that specific sector? And kind of understanding that. Whereas that sector, in comparison to say like the tech sector, there'll be slightly different ways that those sectors are impacted. So it's kind of just reading around that, understanding it and thinking, okay, so the agreement says this is the sector that's impacted. I think this is going to impact certain firm clients because of X, Y, and Z. And just kind of really understanding what the firm does, because there's no point going in to an interview or a VAC scheme assessment center and saying, do you know what, lads, I think the fishing industry are going to be really heavily impacted by this new agreement. Whilst that shows an understanding, if that firm doesn't actually operate in that sector, you're wasting your time. And you haven't really shown that you understand what the firm is about. You're just kind of saying surface level commercial points. What assessors want to see in their future talent is how and why does this affect the firm that you're applying to, the firm that you should be showcasing an understanding of and the work that it does.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that is really key, because I'm just picturing someone, in their interview, if they did pull out an insight like that, like it's not just that you understand this commercial story and its implications, but you understand its implications for that specific firm that you're applying to. I could really see that helping someone stand out so much. So thank you so much. I guess then, while we're kind of talking about law firms, the perspective of law firms, because we've talked a little bit about the commercial considerations of businesses and the kind of advice that they would need. But what are some of the commercial considerations of law firms with a change like this?
I think we are going to see, we've already seen quite a lot of rhetoric from firms around the agreement and kind of summarizing what the agreement is going to do and it's intended to do. But I think what we are going to see more of as we get a greater understanding of it is that law firms will be looking at the ways that this is going to impact and challenge clients to kind of develop sort of targeted solutions and offerings that they can use across their client bases. We spoke on this in the intermediate point, albeit briefly, is that when Brexit was coming into effect, a lot of firms developed get ready for Brexit toolkits, offered contract reviews, offered sort of compliance checks. And I think we're going to see the same. But obviously for this new agreement, this new sort of legal landscape is getting businesses ready for this closer alignment with Europe. And that's sort of something clients can offer, law firms can offer to clients. And then you can kind of get that feedback from clients within specific sectors to say, we think this is going to impact us X, Y, and Z. You can kind of gauge from your clients what their pressure points are, what their pinpoints are, and then really start developing offerings in collaboration with your lawyers that can be given to the clients to help ease pain points. And I also think there's a real chance for law firms to kind of push themselves out there and be seen as kind of industry leaders and kind of ahead of the game by having sort of their lawyers post for leadership points around this, saying, this is what the agreement says, this is what this is going to do, and kind of disseminate that to clients through kind of webinars, interactive sessions, speaking at, going to clients and delivering talks, taking your employment team, your talented employment lawyers to a client and say, this new agreement is coming in, let us talk to your HR team and we can showcase and share how this is going to impact you, what you need to be doing. And I think doing stuff like that really, from a commercial perspective of the firm, allows the firm to be at the forefront and showing clients why it's specialized in the kind of added value that the firms can give.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is a really useful insight too, because I always think with these commercial awareness sessions, it's so useful to give some more insight into how law firms operate. And I think students often, especially when they're at the very beginning, they think of lawyers as helping with cases or helping with deals. But I think this kind of stuff, it actually forms such a big portion as well of the work that sometimes people are not aware of, just how much lawyers are really, one, working to just keep clients informed of changes, but then also this kind of the marketing elements as well of firms being able to position themselves as a leader. So thank you so much for highlighting that. Was there anything else you wanted to highlight at the advanced level?
Nothing specific. I would just add to the point that you just mentioned, Tori, that how we're doing this now, talking about topics, this agreement, for example, is exactly what lawyers at law firms do to their clients. They will take a huge legal change like this, and they will have their talented experts, their senior lawyers, their associates, go and talk to the clients directly, obviously more tailored to the clients and more focused around the actual legal implications themselves to the clients. But this is a huge part of the job, is not just going through the motions and drafting contracts, but understanding what these regulatory changes are, how they're going to impact clients, and what does that actually mean for the client as a sort of the end recipient of these changes. So it's great to understand the law, to be able to draft a clause around regulatory change, for example, an updated contract. But to really take it to the next level, you need to kind of understand what the implication of this is. What does that look like for the client? And ultimately, what is this going to do for their business operations? And I think that's where students really get the chance to kind of showcase a deeper level of commercial awareness, is just understanding, so how does this affect business? How does this affect clients? But also, how does this affect the law firm itself? And they're just key questions for sort of future talent to kind of keep in mind.
For sure. And even as we were talking about the kind of updates, like blog posts, that kind of thing, that's something that trainees can be involved in as well. So it's not something that just the most senior lawyers are doing, puzzling out these new changes. It's something that you might do as a trainee as well, which I think is so exciting. Sounds like really fun, I think, actually figuring out the changes in the law and really what that means.
Yeah, and it's a really good way to understand it as well. You're completely right. If those watching go onto their potential law firm's website, they'll see a lot of articles authored by a partner and a trainee. And it's most likely that the trainee's done a lot of the research, really got sort of into the depths of the topic, drafted it, and just kind of had the support of the partner just to help like kind of tidy things up, because the partner has the years of experience. So it's something that trainees will be doing massively. And it's something you can start doing now if you're so inclined to do so, is kind of find these topics that we've been talking about. If there's one that you really, really find fascinating and interesting, go into it deeper, start writing your own kind of thought pieces around it, and what you think. Obviously, you can't give legal advice, but you can kind of just share what you think. And I think that's a really good way to kind of start honing your kind of craft and being able to articulate certain thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. That's, I think, a great tip to end on, because that's very actionable. That's something that our viewers can take away and work on. And then, of course, keep up to date on this story as well, because this will likely continue to be in the news. And like Henry said, there's lots to look into with this agreement that we haven't been able to get into. So if you're interested, definitely look into it further. So thank you so much, Henry, for your super valuable insights. I think today in particular, there were so many things that are really things people can take away and use in their interviews, their applications. So thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers, listeners, for joining today's Commercial Awareness Compass. Remember always that this is not just about staying on top of the news and repeating the headlines that you hear. Commercial awareness is so much about understanding why these events matter to clients and how you as a future lawyer can provide that strategic value. So whether you're at the beginner, intermediate, or advanced levels, you really want to be approaching each story with a curious, analytical mindset. We've talked in this session already of some of the questions that you can ask yourself. And then otherwise, join us next week to keep building your commercial awareness. And until then, prepare without the panic.